Thank you very much, Patrick, and thank you all, the House, for this great event under the circumstances. Without any further ado, I would like just to briefly introduce myself. As Patrick mentioned, I am a financial economist by training, and I'm a professor of management practice at the University of Cambridge, where I'm directing the Circular Economy Center. We have been working on a number of projects, but today's panel discussion is a very important one, in my opinion, because it is about linking Industry 4.0 and circularity. Now, as part of the fourth industrial revolution, the Internet of Things is going to be extremely important because it is that linkage that's going to establish some kind of connectivity between the real assets and cyberspace. And that is where hopefully it will be one of the enablers of circularity in general. Now, today's panel, our distinguished panelists are, if I may just list the names, and then I will let them, in the interest of time, to introduce themselves. We have Pia Alonso Ribas, and Pia is from UNIT, and Becky is from the Institute of Development Studies. And then we have Moyiwa Oyinlala, and he's from the Montfort University. So may I kindly ask Pia to kickstart the presentation, if I may.
Thank you, Kyle. I'm Pia Alonso. I'm in Uruguay. It's 6 a.m. here in the morning, so good morning for everyone too. I don't want to take many minutes introducing myself, but I'm an economist. Then I've been involved in sustainability projects for like 5 years ago, more or less. I'm working on UNIDO, Latin America. We are covering 4 countries here. Uruguay, we are based here as a regional office. And we are covering Argentina, Paraguay, Uruguay, and Chile. So our main work here is to work with governments and private sector in boosting like a circular economy into the agenda. And we have many projects. I would like to mention some of them this morning, but just to stick to the time, I'm going to put the clock here. Just I would like to mention some ideas this morning regarding the link between the circular economy and Industry 4.0 in this context of the coronavirus, first of all, because I think it's really relevant to mention what we are going through. This first idea, it refers to the critical situation of this pandemic that we are going through and how this is affecting our countries and also especially small economies like Uruguay economy. I will focus on what the crisis has triggered so far as responsive effects and what this has revealed for us so far. So, as you may know, and you can see in social media, there are different initiatives that are using, for example, 3D printing technologies that began appearing all around the world to provide these solutions to the lack of medical supplies for prevention. I want to mention an example here of Uruguay, the Technological University of Uruguay, it's called UTEC, created an open innovation platform called Co-Innovation, which aims to produce these biomedical supplies, but using digital manufacturing tools. They are producing, like, for example, masks, full face protection screens, and other safety devices that will contribute to this first stage of the pandemic. That is the important thing is to flattening this contagion curve. So this platform it started 12 days ago, just I think more or less, and it gathered already more than 300 volunteers, most of them from the maker community here in Uruguay and the academia. And they have almost 100 3D printers that from the different users in the whole country. And they also are doing a campaign and receiving donations of many materials to produce these medical devices, like such as PLA plastics and other type of materials. But what I wanted to point out, I think it's relevant of this type of initiatives, is that they started asking mainly among companies, but also to the society with a campaign, online campaign, for donations of unused printers or maybe CD players, whatever thing you have in your companies and in your house, PC towers, other electronics. So this has given the relevance to the complicated situation of electric and electronic waste management that we are having in our country. So this opens a whole new possibility to put this issue on the agenda, and it's also making relevant the concept of reusing this type of materials. This project also, in the spirit of with the circular economy principles, in the second stage that they are preparing for the project, and it goes with the epidemic symptom treatment stage also. They intend to develop for the replacement of some of the parts that they need to be changed or maybe changed or fixed to ensure the operation of the equipment for the treatment of the patient. With this kind of example here, in countries like Uruguay, we are demonstrating that having digital manufacturing technology to perform prototyping and being able to test different solutions quickly and efficiently is a great advantage for nowadays crisis that we're living, and maybe this is a responsive effect of the crisis. So we here in the team, we were asking ourselves the other day, and I think we are not seeing this right now, but maybe in a while we can get some conclusions. To what extent this crisis will be a trigger for changing into a more sustainable lifestyle or production or not, and maybe it can be a trigger for the modernization of the productive systems here of Latin America. The productive systems in our countries are still in a 2.0 era, with really very few companies using Industry 4.0 technology. So I think we can see in the few next months if this can affect positively the industry and our local economies. The other thing that we were talking about in the team is that this global crisis evidence a lack of national capacity. This is not that related to circular economy, but I think it's important to make a point. National capacity is mainly the lack of national capacity is one of the reasons is the consequences that global trade has on it. So crises like these ones highlights the relevance of business models that are anchored to local production and the local market, and adopting 4.0 technologies can really help solving this type of issues, and maybe it can promote new business models anchored to circular economy concepts too. I think I have a few more minutes, so I want to mention one of the projects that we are working on in Uruguay, especially not related to coronavirus crisis, and then in Q&A session we can go through other projects if you want. I want to mention Circular Opportunities. It's a program that it's executed by the National Development Agency and where UNIDO, through another of the projects we have here, it's called BioValor, has been directly involved, providing financial support in the first edition in 2018, and then in the second edition in 2019, we provided technical support from the BioValor team. The objective mainly of this program is to promote this an effective transition towards the circular economy by financing, for example, the business ideas validation, the support in the implementation of projects, and in this second edition, the prototyping. In the first round, 2018, mainly recycling projects and ideas were received, making evidence that there was a hence lack of understanding of what circular economy is about really. And so during the second round in 2019, the inclusion of financing prototypes and servitization facilitated the entry of Industry 4.0 technologies into the whole picture. So the program started emphasizing the promotion and validation of new business models that aim at, for example, selling a service instead of a product, or production customization, to mention some of the examples. I think I don't want to extend, so I think I'm going to leave it, stop here, and give the time to other panelists, and we can go through other UNIDO's projects related to energy or automation afterwards, if you would like to talk about. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Pia, for your great punctuality and for the great insights that you have given all of us. And 3D printing is certainly one of great enablers to achieving circularity. Of course, we will leave it until the Q&A to have more of an interactive session. Our second speaker is Dr. Becky Faith from the Institute of Development Studies. So may I ask Becky to take the floor. The digital floor, if I may.
And hopefully you can see my presentation.
Yes.
Yeah, fantastic. Great.
Thank you very much.
You can see me as well.
Yes.
So thank you for inviting me, and to a great talk from Pia. And I was really interested to kind of reflect on the importance of kind of bottom-up innovation systems that she was talking about, because that very much ties in with some of the issues that I'm going to be talking about. So I'm going to be talking about gender digital inequalities and innovation systems in general. Just to introduce myself, I lead the Digital and Technology Cluster at the Institute of Development Studies. I'm a former colleague of Patrick's there. We're at the University of Sussex. We're the leading global research and learning institution for sustainable development, and we're first in the world for development studies, and we're rapidly transitioning to an online institution as we're teaching virtually at the moment. And today I'm going to be drawing on the research we've done and my particular research expertise on gender and technology, on innovation and frontier technologies, and also on the future of work. And those are the three big themes that we work on in our research group. So I'm going to be talking about innovation systems, really. And this quote from Cynthia Coburn is from 1985, and I think that tells us something about the kind of persistence of these debates about who wins and who benefits from innovation systems. And so they're thinking about the fourth industrial revolution as a socio-technical innovation system. So it's typically developed and used to further the interests of those who are on top. And she's talking about it from a kind of gender and class perspective, but I think that's equally as relevant to think about it in terms of who benefits in terms of developing countries as well. But particularly today, I'm going to be talking about gender and why it's really important to think about gender inequalities in these new innovation systems. So what do we learn from the kind of mainstream development discourse on the fourth industrial revolution? It's very much a kind of what we might call a technologically determinist or a sort of solutionist approach. So it's propelling the digitally ready countries into a new age of unprecedented economic prosperity. So there's a couple of reports that I've got some screenshots from there. One from Brookings about the fourth industrial revolution transforming Africa into a global powerhouse. We've got the World Economic Forum, who are the great champions of this kind of discourse. But so I think it's really important to have actors such as Chatham House and other kind of critical development actors say, well, what does this really mean? Is this going to benefit everybody, or is it going to just carry on benefiting the people who benefited before? So a couple of years ago, we produced a report for the Department for International Development called 10 Frontier Technologies for International Development. And in that report, we looked at a variety of technologies, including some which might be categorized as fourth industrial revolution technologies. So 3D printing was one of the tools we looked at. And this led to the establishment of a multi-million-pound fund by DFID, which is still ongoing on Frontier Technologies, which is funding small pilot projects using these kind of technologies. But we warned in that report that groups that have not already benefited from earlier investment development processes could be marginalized. So that means that if your community has got poor connectivity, it hasn't got the right infrastructure, whether that's roads or electricity or cell towers for mobile phone connections, they could be marginalized. So a lot of the digital innovations that we're talking about here, so 3D printing, Internet of Things, rely on having good levels of connectivity. So existing forms of digital divides, we say in the report, are likely to inhibit their widespread dissemination. In our work in the digital cluster, we talk a lot about how digital inequalities can amplify existing offline inequalities. So it's very important to recognize that these benefits are not evenly spread. So what about the persistence of these gender digital divides? It's widely known in development that women are just less connected. So even the data, I've got the most up-to-date data on connectivity from the GSMA, from the mobile industry body here. This is the 2020 gender gap report. 300 million, that's almost 1/3 of a billion fewer women than men access the mobile internet. So South Asia has a mobile internet gender gap of 51%. Overall, even when it comes to kind of your basic kind of dumb phone, women are still globally 8% less likely than men to own a mobile. And these challenges are intersectional. So for women in rural areas, for disabled women, from women from kind of marginalized communities, they're less likely to be online. Added to the kind of structural issues around basic access to the technology, we've got a whole set of social norms that mean that it's just much less socially acceptable for women to use technology. So research from the Girl Effect project shows that more than 50% of girls in Malawi, India, Nigeria, and Rwanda asked permission from a male gatekeeper to use a phone, whether that's a brother or a father. And the UN Special Rapporteur on Violence has shown that online gender-based violence, in her terms, hinders women's full enjoyment of their human rights. And we know that the fear of online gender-based violence, so even the kind of reputational harm that women fear from using technology, just keeps them offline and keeps them silent. So we can see a whole set of gender digital divides in access to and use of technology that are not just structural, they're not just about money, they're also about social norms. So when it comes to automation, which is another important area, the fourth industrial revolution, replacing of kind of routine tasks by robots being automated, whether that's a supermarket checkout or it's garment workers getting their jobs displaced because of the sew bot that we're seeing emerging that can do simple sewing routines. So we know that women, their jobs are at risk, and girls in low and middle income countries, their options for work in the future will narrow as routine jobs became less available due to automation. We did some work for the Malala Fund a couple of years ago, which is the kind of NGO established by Malala, and we found that 1 billion girls are at risk of being left behind because of a lack of education, so basic primary education, but also because they're just less likely to have the digital skills they need. And we know that when we're talking about work, it's very important not just to talk about the formal economy. So 61.2% of global employment is informal. And so digital skills aren't just important in the formal economy. Without these basic digital skills and access, women can't use mobile money. They can't use things like WhatsApp for informal trading and for job seeking. And so those barriers, whether they're social norms or the structural barriers, are keeping women down. When it comes to STEM education, so we need women in the innovation system. So globally, only 35% of students in STEM in higher education are women, and women who do get into STEM professions leave in disproportionate numbers, whether it's because they come back after maternity leave and the technology's moved on, so it's really hard to keep up, or they face hostility in the workplace, or the working hours are just not compatible with family life. And we know that gender gaps grow as digital tasks become more complex. So we did some research recently for Gender Insight, which is a UN body which promotes women in science, innovation, technology and engineering. And we looked at how to stop this dropout and what it means that the women are falling away from the whole production of scientific knowledge and falling away from these innovation systems, and what that means. And what it means when you don't have women in these systems is that you don't have women's perspective. So but the inverse of that is if we do have gender equality in science and in technology and engineering, workforce and leadership, all the way up to the top, it means you have a wider range of perspectives, leading to more innovative problem solving and decision making. And we can think of this gender inequality in kind of basic terms in the devices we use every day. So, for example, on an iPhone, by default, where's the period tracking app? So the technology we use every day doesn't factor in women's bodies and experiences. And there's a whole range of examples, from poorly designed breast pumps to the way that crash test dummies are typically women. There's a whole range of innovations that just ignore women's bodies and ignore women's physicality and the differences and women's different needs as well. So bringing women in right the way through these innovation systems will lead to better innovation, better products, innovation system that actually serves every member of the community. So we know, we've just seen from those statistics that women are underrepresented as owners of mobile phones, as users of the internet, in STEM education. They're underrepresented as programmers, as innovators and inventors, but also when we get up to the decision-making roles, the roles that really shape this innovation system, they're underrepresented as patent holders, as owners of companies, on the boards of companies, and in important technology governance roles. So on the high-level panels and boards that actually kind of control the internet, women's voices are less heard. So it means that issues such as gender-based violence online aren't taken as seriously. So nearly 88% of ICT ministers are men. Only 28 countries have a woman ICT minister. Only 25 have women heading the telecom regulator. And we know that online violence is endemic, that 73% of women have been exposed to or have experienced some form of online violence. And when it comes to emergent technologies or important technologies like machine learning.
Sorry, just in the interest of time, Becky, about a couple of minutes. And
yeah, that's great.
Thank you very much, Betty.
Thank you. So it's only 13.5% female. So here's a quick case study on why this matters. You might think, oh, okay, well, we could get more women into computing. So here's a case from machine learning. So we've got a Google Translate system, which automatically translates a nurse as a woman and a defendant as a man. So that's not so good for the men either, because it assumes that the criminals are all men. So we're seeing at the moment, and Pia mentioned this in her talk, that another system is possible. In this current crisis, we've got some indications that we can fix these innovation systems if the political will is there. So the digital divides, which keep women online, we've all had our data caps removed by our mobile phone providers. So it shows that that's actually possible, that the mobile phone companies can cut their huge kind of profits somewhat when it comes to seeing internet access and communications as a public good.
May I interject in the interest of time, and
okay.
we leave it also to the Q&A to elaborate more on this very, very interesting topic. Thank you very much, Becky, for that, but we'll come back to you.
Okay.
Now, I would like to introduce our third panelist. And our third panelist is Muyiwa Oyilala, and he's from Montfort University, and we'll be talking about the digital innovation for transitioning to a circular plastic economy in Africa. I mean, plastic is one of the case studies that a lot of us are working on, and it'll be also great to listen to that. Thank you very much, Muyiwa, for being with us. And if I may ask you to just briefly introduce yourself as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Khalid, and thank you to Chatham House for putting up such a brilliant event. My name is Muyiwa Oyinlola, and I'm an associate professor in engineering for sustainable development at the Montfort University. So basically, I work in the area of sustainable development broadly, and one of my areas is plastic waste management, and I see how different ways we can build local skills to tackle plastic waste management using local materials. And today I'll be presenting some of those to you. I'll give you a quick background, just adding to what Becky and Pierre have said, give you some examples of digital innovations that's promoting circularity in Africa, talk about a few of my projects, and then end with some concluding thoughts. Since yesterday, we've heard so much about the problem of solid waste management, especially in the global south. There's low collection, low recycling rates, and what that ends up with is we find loads of waste on streets in cities and towns in Africa. On the other hand, which can be seen as a plus, Africa is rising in terms of it has the highest global internet penetration growth. It has a very young population, and no doubt, as Becky just highlighted, digital innovations are playing a significant role in development. So we've seen that in different sectors, for example, the financial sector. And so, as we've said, the circular economy has a significant role to play in terms of solid waste management. And on top of that, digital innovations can enhance and accelerate this transition. So I'll just give you a few examples of digital innovations promoting circularity. The first example is Your Waste from Uganda. On the screen, you should be able to see their app, which is used for requesting waste collection or subscribing to waste collection. So they're a private startup, and what they do is you have the app and you can request, you can subscribe, or you can request a special pickup, which here will be a visit to the tip or hiring a tip. Also, what they claim to do is that they analyze your waste streams and recommend recycling programs so that you can reduce your waste that is going to landfill, as well as get some money from engaging in recycling programs. The second one is Recyclers from Nigeria, which Davina touched on yesterday. They also, similar to that, they work with very low-income communities, and give them incentives for recycling their waste. So also what it is that they work with these waste collectors, they give them an opportunity to own their business, and they go into the communities, collect waste, and the people who engage in that are able to get incentives for engaging in this waste collection. The next one is Mr. Green Africa from Kenya. They're based in Nairobi, and we heard a lot yesterday about the informal waste economy, the informal waste collectors. And basically what these guys do is they use technology to streamline their operations. So for example, waste collectors can use their mobile app to tell when when they have waste ready for collection, and also they can use the app to streamline the collection. So basically optimize route for collection. And then also they have fair trade products based on giving the collectors fairer wages. So that's Mr. Green Africa in Kenya. So I've given you 3 of very many innovations across the continent. There are so many, and loads of startups coming up. However, one of the things we've realized is that most of these startups are local and have not scaled. So Recyclers, for example, they've been around for about 8 years, but they're still based in Lagos. They haven't gone across the continent, and they have a fantastic model which can actually transform waste collection in these places. Most of them work in silos, and what we've also seen is that most of them are focused on the recovery aspects of the circular economy. So this project, which is in collaboration with Chatham House, Patrick, is looking at digital innovations for the circular plastic economy in Africa. And what we're doing is basically looking at all these digital innovations and trying to assess their strengths and weaknesses. We're trying to identify opportunities for synergy, business models, policies, and the likes, and trying to see what innovations do we need to promote to let people, to get innovators to move into, to close the gap of the circular economy. So this was supposed to start last month, but due to the pandemic, we've not we'll start next month. So that's digital innovations for circularity in Africa. The second one is a circular plastic project, which we started about 2 years ago. And following up for what Pierre and Becky said, frontier technology is a game changer in these places. So 3D printing is one. And what this project is focused on is taking plastic waste and converting them into filaments for additive manufacturing. So basically, in most of these countries, yes, there's 3D printing, but the cost of filaments are quite expensive. So what this project is doing is, how do we make a process to convert that using local skills? This is quite important, especially in the current situation where we rely on conventional supply chains, which are quite complex. And in Africa, you have loads of challenges. For example, you have lack of connectivity in terms of infrastructure for roads. And so in remote areas, it may not be profitable to get supplies to those places. So what we are looking at is, how do we move from this complex supply chain to have a system where we have a hub, a room or somewhere where plastic waste comes in, and then we do some process using local skills and local materials, convert them into filaments, and then we can 3D print materials. So Pierre gave examples of 3D printing helping for the current pandemic and the like. So for example, a hospital bed to a wheel might be off. Do you need to wait several months for a replacement, or can we just print that locally? So in terms of this distributed manufacturing, I think it it has a significant place in development. So those are two examples. In the interest of time, I'll just conclude with a few thoughts. I think digital innovations provide significant opportunity for citizen engagement. So that's in terms of not just in recovery, but reduction of consumption and other aspects. I think when with the Internet of Things, combined Internet of Things, we will get significant data to implement the circular plastic economy or the circular economy as a whole. And finally, which I think is quite key, is the opportunity for capacity building. So one of the things that is lacking significantly is capacity for the circular economy. And as this pandemic has shown us, most of our learning and teaching is going online. So I think digital innovations can provide a significant opportunity to build capacity across Africa for a circular economy. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Mo. This is excellent. And thank you to all of our distinguished panelists for the insights that they've given us. The three common denominators that I've seen there, which is basically amongst the three distinguished panelists who talked about the topics that they're working on, is basically in the innovation system, 3D printing, whether we are in Uruguay or Africa, or things relating to innovation systems in Africa and the gender equality. Now, we will go to straight into the Q&A, if I may. And the first question is for Becky. Now, thank you for the excellent presentation. One of the issue is that, do you have any specific examples of success stories with regard to the STEM model?
So I just typed an answer in the box. We did, so there were a few countries which are outliers, which are kind of positive deviants. So one of the examples is India. So my former PhD supervisor, Clem Herman, did a big research project on exactly what it is that means that women in India are much more likely to be successful in the IT industry. This was in the IT industry. And also in our research that we did for the Gender Insight, it comes down to fixing the care economy. I have to say, it's the thing that I always come back to, and I'm sure lots of the parents on this call who are trying to silence their children in the background will agree. If you fix the care issues, if you arrange for an on-site nursery, if you arrange for paid paid care for your employees, so any kind of care, addressing the care issues, I think is really important. And I think research that we've done on open source communities, in trying to encourage more women into open source communities, show that codes of conduct can be really successful. And that means that so often these communities, whether they're online or offline, can be very male dominated. Ensuring that women within, and everybody in these communities, is treated with respect. I think it's also about funding. I think ultimately what changes these things is funding. So the EU, I think in their Horizon 2020 funding, had a system whereby you had to have women on your, a certain percentage of women, I think it was 50% in your kind of review panel. So saying to people, you're only going to get funding if you have a certain percentage of women involved in your project. And people might say, oh no, I just can't find any women experts in plastics, or so on and so forth. There's a kind of positive cycle there, because you find the experts and then that expert kind of mentors other experts, and so you get that positive reinforcement. So I think there's a whole range of things. There's fixing the care economy, so ensuring that women have kind of paid care, or care responsibilities taken care of. I think there's tying it in with funding, so that funders are kind of setting some kind of normative standards there as well. It's really important.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Vicky. We have a question, and that is, what kind of incentives are in place for governments, companies, and citizens to engage in recycling and circular economy initiative? And this would be for both Mowiwa and Pia, if that's okay.
Okay. So I'm not aware of many incentives for recycling. Most of the companies I've talked about are very, they're private, and they more or less look at it. So they will collect your waste and sell it to recyclers, process it and sell it to recyclers. So there's value in that. Part of what we're trying to do, our project is bringing together the public sector and the private sector, as well as academia, to be able to see what synergies and what can the government do in some of these countries to promote this, what policies can be in place. So I'm not aware, there might be, Africa is quite wide, but I'm not aware of any major government incentives. I've seen policies like the plastic ban and Cuba. I'm not aware of incentives for recycling yet.
Thank you, Mowiwa. What about Pia, from Uruguay's perspective? Are there any incentive programs for recycling and circular economy initiatives?
Well, I want to mention maybe we as I mentioned, with the circular economy program, a circular opportunities program. It's a program from the government, but they want to move to push like forward and stop talking about what it's recycling indeed. But the policy must accompany this type of projects. But I want to mention, for example, the CAIME. CAIME, it's a center of industrial automation and mechatronics. It's a public center from the Ministry of Industry and other partners, public partners, and it's financed by UNIDO. It was like conceived really to be a 4.0 modular laboratory, and it's a first high-tech platform here in the region. The main idea is not only for Uruguay, but people from Argentina are coming here and taking courses and all that. And this center aims to create the necessary capabilities to spread automation technology. The link we are doing here with circular economy is attached to a concept of a predictive maintenance concept, like, for example, through sensoring and data analytics, industries and business can extend the useful life of technology. So the government is trying to promote all these initiatives, not only for recycling, that it's the last stage of circular economy, but like trying to move this type of initiatives to move for an automation and introduce 4.0 technology into the game, you know.
Thank you very much for that. There is one question to the panel, and that is, do the panel see potential of green industrial parks, economic zones serving as hubs and providing a hub basically in general for innovation, business support and skills in the developing world? Would that be something?
Okay, yes, I think there's a place of synergy. I think when people come together, the more can be achieved, so it's greater than the sum. So I think, in my opinion, yes, I see a point in that.
Okay. There is a question, and that is, do you see any possibility, sorry, anyone else want to comment on having these hubs, industrial parks, innovation parks, to facilitate the kind of things that you were discussing earlier? PM or Becky?
No, just to mention that shortly, I think, like, for example, centers like CAIME and another project that we are working on related to energy. It's important to collaborate among other countries, to share knowledge, to share experiences. And this is really new for developing countries. And it's quite difficult to link circular economy to Industry 4.0 in countries such as all of the region in Latin America, that they are like in another area, as I mentioned earlier. So I think it's important to generate these synergies and share experiences, and to demonstrate that there's an increase in productivity also with the incorporation of this type of technology. So yes, I agree with that.
Thank you, Pia. Becky, would you like to add to this? Thank you.
Just think about other spaces like maker spaces and other more, as well as the kind of more formal industrial spaces, how to use more informal industrial spaces like small maker spaces. And we've seen, so for example, in this country, we have the Restart project, which organizes kind of repair workshops just in where people are. So I think there's a real, so going to community centres and schools and so on. So I think there's a really good example for meeting people where they're at, to kind of promote grassroots innovation and repair.
Excellent. Thank you very much. There is a question relating, which is another interesting question, and that is to Muyiwa, and that is, 3D printing might have an impact on disrupting the traditional economies of scale model. Now, so how do you think, according to the person who's asked the question, that SMEs can adjust and adapt to this?
So yes, so I think the economies of scale model in Africa, as I tried to point out in my presentation, sometimes can be a challenge. So for example, in remote areas, you need one product. The cost of taking that product all the way to that remote area is far more than that product. So in terms of that, there is the advantage of that. In terms of, because I think if you look at demand can be a game changer, because of the type of population there, demand is not as high as places here. And what happens is that you have, you can make bespoke solutions, which is, I think, what works in Africa. So I think in Africa, our traditional economies of scale may not be always the optimal solution for them. So from an African perspective, I think the 3D printing model where you can make products for local things might be a better solution.
Right. Well, thank you very much. Any comments from Pia with regard to the SMEs and the impact of 3D printing on economies of scale? It might have some kind of an issue with SMEs.
I think, for example, financing the implementation of projects and helping the SMEs financing the prototyping and knowing these new technologies, but helping them with financial assistance is a key element here. Governments should push that, put resources on that. Uruguay we are having a really hard impact in SMEs right now. We have micro and small business, mostly it's 90, I think it was 95% of our companies are SMEs. So to help them adopt the new technologies by giving some kind of financial assistance or subsidies, yes, I think it's relevant for adopting new technologies and boosting circular economy into their companies.
Great, thank you very much for that. I think I'm going to go for one last question, and that is, do you think from the kind of research that you're doing, that a combination of incentives and penalties might work, or basically, investment and the enforcement at the same time? Do you think that that is something that is relevant to take into account, both incentives and penalties if there's no compliance? Becky, would that be something that you would consider in your research?
I think the issues that I've been talking about, so when it comes to care and addressing digital inequalities, you need incentives. So you need cheaper data. So what keeps people from using, we had some great examples of some apps there, but maybe what keeps people from using these apps is the punitive data costs for mobile phone calling, for mobile phone data use in countries. So I think you need incentives like mobile phone operators reducing the cost of data, so that there are incentives to actually use these apps without affordable data. And we know that people, the poorer you are, the poor pay more for mobile data. So that's just a massive barrier. You could have all the great digital platforms to get people, to get waste pickers kind of connected to this more formal economy. But if they can't afford the data to get onto the platforms to find out where they're meant to be going that day, then it's kind of absolutely pointless.
Thank you very much, Becky. Pia, would you like to add something to incentives versus penalties in order to facilitate and enable circularity?
Well, this is a thing that we are always talking about here in Uruguay and the other countries that we are covering. It's quite, yes, incentives. You must put some incentives, of course, and also what we are seeing that some kind of penalties sometimes help to move from one technology to another and help these small companies or industries. Okay, you must go this way, and to do that, in general, you have to use some penalties to do that, more than incentives. But that's my opinion.
Thank you very much. And Muwiwa?
So yes, I agree that it's a combination of both. So for example, if you look at Rwanda, and where there's a complete single plastic use ban, that's worked very well. You have other areas where they haven't had like a complete ban. So yes, it's a combination of both, because when you think about it, it's people, and people have different drivers or motivations. So I think that's why the state has to work together with the innovators to make sure that we come up with solutions that together, using a multi-pronged approach, will result in good solutions.
Well, great. Well, thank you very much to our three distinguished panelists for the different topics that they have shared with us and the insights that they've given us all relating the fourth 4.0 industrial revolution to circularity and the different models that we have. Just a little comment and note from my part, and that is, when we think about the 4.0, of course, it is about the ability to connect the physical and the cyber network, and where we will need, of course, real-time information flow. And in addition to that, we're talking about big data, we're talking about the Internet of Things, we're talking about robotics, we're talking about artificial intelligence. So as much as there are a lot of challenges that we see, I'm sure that there are great opportunities that one can capitalize on in whatever area that we are focusing on, relating to the future of work, innovation system, gender inequality, 3D printing, dealing with the plastic issues, and so on and so forth. So on this note, I would like to really thank our three distinguished panelists for their insights, and we really appreciate your presence with us today. Thank you very, very, very much. So in the interest of time, I'm going to be just
Thank you.
strict, and then I'll pass it. Thank you very much to all, and I will pass it on to Patrick. Thank you.